My name's Pete Wood, you're watching Hexhamtv. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Jamie Driscoll, the Metro Mayor for the North of Tyne.
So Jamie, you've been a member of the Labour Party as a Labour councillor and mayor for the North of Tyne. Why did you decide to leave the party?
Well, it was incredibly disappointing. The Labour Party's got themselves into this place where they are pushing favoured candidates, essentially. I've been the mayor of Northumberland, North Tyneside, Newcastle since 2019. I've created over 5,000 jobs. I've got fantastic value for money and negotiated the best funded devolution deal in the country. And the Labour Party thought that that wasn't good enough. So they denied local members the chance to vote for me. They allowed other candidates to go forward, but they took one of them out because they didn't like him. So they slid their favoured candidate in.
So what made you decide to stand as an independent?
Well, it was a funny thing. I've had so much support because people have known the job I've done, and I brought Northumberland into the new devolution deal, who have Conservative leadership. I brought County Durham in, who have a coalition, including the Lib Dems and various independents. And so many people had said, look, Jamie, you're really good at working cross-party, which is what people want, really, isn't it? I mean, what we want is politicians who work together to get things done rather than staying in their trenches and throwing insults at each other. And the response was huge, including from the vast majority of the Labour Party, because when they blocked me, there were Labour parties that refused to participate in the selection. There were people threatened with legal action if they even mentioned my name. There was mass uproar. There was people walking out of meetings. And so, because businesses and trade unions, because Conservatives and Liberals and so many people in the Labour Party said, look, Jamie, we want you to do the job because you've got the experience, you've proved it with the results. And funnily enough, it was sitting around the dinner table with my family, and I said, look, so many people are asking me, should I do this? It's a big wrench. I don't want the Labour Party in the place it's in at the moment. And my younger son, he said, look, Dad, you're going to be fighting for creating jobs, you're going to be fighting for the region, you're going to be fighting the climate emergency anyway. Do it fighting for a position where you're going to have the power to do something about it. And that just made so much sense to me.
So if you were re-elected to an expanded mayoral area, what would your priorities be?
Well, the number one thing I want to achieve is to sort our transport system out. Because when the North of Tyne was created, and other people deserve the credit for that, I didn't create the North of Tyne, although I was the first and only mayor, it was immediately apparent to me that it was missing key powers, and that was the ability to control our buses, the metro, the trains, and get them working together. And in places like Hexham and its surrounding areas, anyone who uses public transport knows how bad it is. And the new devolution deal, I went down to Treasury in February 2020. I said, look, if I can bring the region together, will you give us the money to make this work? And they said, look, we might, all right. So I called their bluff, spent a lot of time persuading a lot of people who didn't want to come together, and some did, and some worked very progressively with me. And we've now got the best funded devolution deal in England, and that will allow us to bring the buses, integrate them into the metro, integrate in the heavy rail system, and active travel like cycling and walking, and I want to expand car clubs so that we will get a system that's so good that people will prefer to leave their cars at home in many instances. And some people, obviously people with disabilities will prefer to drive. If you're a doctor on call or you're a plumber with a van full of tools, you're going to need your car to work, I get that. But if we can get the entire thing where you have a public transport account on your smartphone, so boom, on the bus, it's not waiting, you don't have to pay your fare because it knows you're on, or you can do that with a smart card. You still be able to get a ticket if you want to buy one, if you're a visitor from out of the area, for example. But I'll then be able to get it so that the buses are faster getting into Newcastle, for example, so that we bypass the traffic by having a bus lane with a transponder on the bus. That can then change the lights to red for the cars, it nips past, back to green for the cars. Every bus full of passengers is 50 cars off the road, so it's a real win-win. It's good for the climate, more people on public transport, because one ticket to get you right across the region from Berwick to Barnard Castle, if that's the journey you choose, it gets more people on, that gets more money into it, that makes a bigger service more viable. And there's metro lines I want to reopen from Washington, or from South Hilton through Washington to Gateshead. We're already reopening the Northumberland line, one of only 2 places in the country that's getting it done. So I've proved, with colleagues in Northumberland that this is possible. And ultimately, to get travel free on public transport for under 18s. That affects child poverty, it affects hard-working families who are a bit skint, but it also gets kids a little bit more active. It gets them into that pattern that using public transport is actually just the way you do things, and that gives us the long-term sustainability. And in rural areas, you connect that with on-demand transport. And this is where you have much smaller buses. You don't want a double-decker bus through every village every 10 minutes. That makes no sense. But where you can almost book a bus and you say, look, I need to get to work regularly that day and I'll just book it. And the bus computer system will factor that into its route and it will just swing by the nearest stop to you and get you where you're going at the same price as anyone else using the system.
Jamie, you've been the first mayor of the North of Tyne. What's been your biggest disappointment?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, if we phrase it like that, was COVID. Because you come in, you want to do a lot of stuff. And when it was a brand new combined authority, when I walked through the door, I had 3 permanent members of staff. The first month I was reading CVs. By the time we had the team built and my senior management in, wham, we're hit by COVID. Everybody's got to go home. And a lot of the stuff that I was really wanting to drive on, we just couldn't do. We had to repurpose it, where we would put the money, how we would still get all the results. But I think we've done terrifically well. 5,377 jobs created now. I mean, now that's remarkable. 1,805 homes, all with affordable housing in. We've increased the skills from 22,000 training places to 33,000 training places a year on the same budget. I mean, when does anyone in government get a 50% increase for value for money? But what it does mean, there's more we could have done in that time. And you always wish that you could do everything in one term. And maybe that was too ambitious in the first place. There's a lot of problems in the North East that need fixing. And the other side of it has been the incredible turmoil in central government. And I found a lot of people, not particularly of my world view, but who've been very good to work with, have found me good to work with, and enabled us to get an awful lot of money for our region to do some good stuff. I've been through 4 prime ministers, 7 chancellors of the Exchequer, God knows how many other ministers. And that combination of the COVID instability and the government instability means that we've still got a lot more that I want to accomplish for us.
In a year or so's time, potentially, we could have a Labour government in centrally. If you're elected, and there are other candidates, but if you're elected, we could have an independent mayor for the North East. How would you get on, bearing in mind the difficulties that have occurred along the way?
Well, you know what? An independent mayor is probably the ideal person, provided they have the personal skills and the experience, which, obviously I've done the job, and the track record's there to show it. But because you're independent, who knows how long the next government's going to be in, what it will be. Someone who's there, putting the North East ahead of party politics, actually puts us in the best position. Now, I was a Labour mayor when I was working with people like Michael Gove, Simon Clark, Grant Shapps, to get us the best funded devolution deal in England. So that ability to work cross-party I can do. You ask the Conservatives in Northumberland or the Liberals in Durham, did they like working with me? Was I effective at getting stuff done? So that's really what matters. Now, some people sometimes think that if you have a mayor of the same party as the government, you're going to get a benefit. Now, you just ask the people of Cambridge and Peterborough, who had a mayor, James Palmer, who was a Conservative, got diddly squat from them, or Tim Bowles, who was the Conservative mayor of the West of England a couple of years ago, didn't get anything out of them. The Labour government, or the Labour leadership at the moment, is pretty much at war with Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham. So the idea that you get any particular favouritism isn't true. The only time that you got anything like that was on Teesside, and that was with Ben Hoochin, and that was because he kind of won almost accidentally. They never thought they were going to get someone in the North East. And has it actually made that much benefit? Well, that's debatable, and obviously there's investigations into him, which is something I'm not going to comment on. But the idea that the Labour Party would somehow funnel money at the North East, no. If there is any corruption, let's hope there isn't. It always goes into marginal places where they're trying to keep hold of.
What needs to change to make the North East more productive?
There's 2 big things that make a difference to productivity that you can actually change. One is people's skills base. And we do so much on that. I mean, just today, I've been visiting one of the programs we've been running very successfully, which teaches people to be heavy goods drivers, and there's another course, warehouse operatives, forklift truck drivers. And I had to go on a forklift truck myself and managed not to crash anything. And it's these skills that make a difference, because we have, across the wider North East, roughly 105,000 people who are unemployed or not registered unemployed, but would like a job. And there's different reasons why people don't appear on the register. And it's getting them the skills. Now, we've done that terrifically well. We've gone from 22,000 to 33,000 a year over the past couple of years under my leadership for the same budget, by actually talking to the employers, talking to the training providers, and talking to the people who want these courses and working out what their barriers are. And sometimes they want the courses running in a way that can do it around their childcare. Or it might be that they don't have Wi-Fi at home and can't complete certain modules. And the ability to change these individual barriers for people is what gets them more skilled. Now, we need more investment. We've done a cracking job at that. You might not realise, last year we were the #1 region in the country for creating jobs from inward investment. And you don't see that splashed over the national news. For the first time ever, the North East is below the national average for unemployment. I'm immensely proud of that, and everybody who's been a part of it. The other part of it is a decent transport system, because if you can't get people to their training opportunities, to college, to university, or to work reasonably quickly and easily, then they miss out on opportunities. And that hits people really hard in rural areas a lot of the time. If you don't have a car, you're kind of snookered if you want to get a job in Newcastle, if it's got any kind of awkward hours at all.
So you've mentioned transport a number of times, but what else could you do to help local people in rural areas like Hexham?
Well, there's a number of things that we do directly in terms of giving power to people in local communities. So I've set up something called the Crowdfund North of Tyne, and this is where local communities can come up with a project. It has to be for the benefit of the community and not personal profit. And then if they can demonstrate that people in their community like it by crowdfunding donations, and it's the number of supporters rather than the money raised that matters, then we will put a big slug of money in and that project will go ahead. And that has funded things like the Hexham Bluegrass Festival or Grow Hexham, which, if you don't know about it, is a project where there's people who might have a garden but don't really want a garden, and people who like gardening and don't have a garden. It puts them together and provides them with tools, and then they share the produce, the flowers, the food, whatever that comes out of it. There are a couple of examples. So the door is open if anybody wants actually a community project that we will fund.
How could you help local people with the cost of living?
The cost of living crisis is something that affects everybody, but for some people it puts them below the point where they can manage. The #1 way of dealing with poverty, child poverty, fuel poverty, everything else, is to have people with more money in their pockets. So we've created thousands of jobs. By now I should have created, according to the government target, 1,500 jobs. We're on 5,377. We're smashing this out of the park. A lot of inward investment, a lot supporting local firms to grow, including in the Tyne Valley. But they're backed by our Good Work pledge, which means people are getting a decent wage for it as well. So that's the #1 thing, actually have some money in your pocket. Other parts of it is enabling people to get the skills to do these things. And when it comes to dealing with poverty directly, we run our child poverty prevention programme in 120 schools now. We've expanded it this academic year. And this is giving parents welfare rights advice. There's one case of a family who had a disabled son, did not realise they were eligible for benefits, and have got £11,000 in back money. I mean, that's life-changing for that family. But other things that are helping with school uniform poverty, other issues around that. We're the only combined authority in the country doing it. A lot of people will say, I care about child poverty, but don't do anything. We've done it, we've got the results, and we've been praised by the North East Child Poverty Commission as the model of best practice in the country.
How can you help people gain a foothold on the housing ladder, either through social or affordable housing?
There's two parts to that. One is having the money to do it, and I've spoken about how we're creating jobs and getting people more money. The other is housing supply, particularly in rural areas. through our Brownfield Housing Fund, I don't want to see houses being built in areas of natural beauty. But through the Brownfield Housing Fund, which is something money which we negotiate from government, we clear up brownfield sites. So these may have been an old industrial site, for example, or something with mine working underneath it, which makes it far too expensive for a developer to build the homes on there. So we put the money in to clear up the site, and then we work with providers, including social housing providers, to get these houses built. And there are housing going up in rural areas. There's obviously more in the urban areas as well. And I think we're on about 1,805 homes now. So increasing that supply. Every single one of these projects has affordable housing in it. There was one that the developer wanted to bring forward that didn't have affordable housing in it, right next to St James's Park in Strawberry Place in Newcastle. And I blocked that, and you might have seen that in the newspaper. There were some lovely headlines, said, the mayor saves Newcastle United so it can expand. That wasn't the reason. I'm not allowed to do that. It was because there weren't affordable housing in it. And even in the city centre, if there's no affordable housing, it won't get any public subsidy from me.
How could you help the farming and tourism community in this rural area?
Well, tourism is, it's good in so many ways, because domestic tourism is good for the climate emergency. People aren't flying as much abroad. That's obviously a good thing. And we've done all sorts of events. You might remember the Illuminated Sheep. Well, that was a North of Tyne funded initiative. We fund the chef training excellence, the North East Culinary Awards, so that we can have a higher standard and project a higher standard in terms of tourism, that, this is a place to come for culinary delights. We help local businesses develop bookable products. We've got fantastic countryside, we've got wonderful architecture like Hadrian's Wall, but people walking along Hadrian's Wall doesn't necessarily mean they spend money here. So that process of developing what we call bookable products is a way of saying to tourists, by the way, you can stay at this place, you can buy some artwork from there, you can buy some lovely clothes from there, as well as the food and the drink and the hospitality. And that's one of the direct ways that you help the rural economy. And when it comes to farming, we have a master plan that we're working with Northumbrian County Council on, because there's a big issue. The farming subsidies have not been put in place adequately since we left the European Union. People have been left in limbo, which is a bad thing. But we do need to make sure we're growing food here. And a lot of this is about the sustainability. Now, most of those powers lie with central government, but we are working with that, and we've got pilot status that we're wanting to develop, including with the nature recovery strategy that we're leading on, to try and get central government to, if you pardon the language, to get off the backside and do something about it.
If there's a general election within the next year or so, whichever party gets elected, what would your message be to that party?
My message to anybody in Westminster of any party is, do not try and remote control things from 300 miles away. You will make a mess of it. Work with local people on the ground. We even do that. When we're designing programs, we go to the businesses, we go to the communities, we go to the people who have the lived experience. If we're helping people who are neurodiverse develop training schemes to get work, we ask them what their barriers are. This approach that you can do it from remote control in Westminster will not work. It will waste public money, and you know what? You're not going to be popular unless you start fixing things.
Jamie Driscoll, Independent Mayor of the North of Tyne, thank you very much for talking to Hexhamtv.
Thank you.